Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. I am Andrew Musgrove, joined by our special guest, Mark Carruthers, who was on the podcast not too long ago. He's back to help with the season preview, where we will look across the Premier League and predict the flops to come, the relegation candidates, the top 6 or 7, as well as the best business so far in the transfer market at a time, ladies and gents, when Newcastle United have seemingly got their act together. Mark, welcome back to the podcast. How are you keeping? You well?
I'm good, yeah. Looking forward to the new season. Plenty going on in the summer. Not all positive, as I'm sure we'll discuss. But yeah, looking forward to the season being back and getting things underway again.
Before we delve into the other 19 clubs in the Premier League, let's talk about Newcastle United, because at the time of recording, it's just gone 12:15 on Wednesday, the 13th of August. Newcastle United are closing in on Aston Villa's Jacob Ramsey. That is on top of, obviously, Aaron Ramsdale, Anthony Elanga, Malik Chow. Have I missed anyone out? No, there's only signed 3, haven't there?
Yeah.
So he would be the 4th,
Well,
and then Wissa, hopefully through the door, make it 5.
Yeah, and a couple of youngsters to boot.
Yes. But on Jacob Ramsey, first of all, bit hit and miss, the reaction to this. It's someone, or he is someone that Eddie Howe has liked for a long, long time. He's been linked over the last 2 windows. He's 24 years of age. He is a first team regular at Aston Villa, but of course, the good old PSR nightmare over Aston Villa means that this is a very, very attractive deal, because it's £40 million or a package thereof, and he represents pure profit for Aston Villa. When you saw the news last night that this was more than just rumor and gossip and it was concrete, what was your reaction?
Well, firstly, it's the kind of well-worn verse of Newcastle of going in for long-term targets. It's not a recent thing. This has been ongoing, I think, for 18 months, 2 years now. But I think the biggest thing that he'll offer, and the reason I'm so positive about it, is that he's so versatile, because he can play, kind of across the midfield in various roles. He can play out wide as well. So I think that versatility, giving Newcastle sometimes, they lost a little bit last season when there wasn't as much fluidity in the side. And I think with someone like him, we look back to, and I realize I'm going back nearly 3 years here, but when there was the sort of dynamic between Joe Linton and Joe Willock on that left-hand side of midfield and sort of the front three, it worked brilliantly. And Newcastle became more effective. And I feel as if this signing, and I'm not going to say he's going to play every week, he's a good option to play every week if needed, but he could get Newcastle back towards that and make them more fluid, instead of last year where I thought maybe things became a little bit predictable in midfield and up front and a little bit stagnant.
Well, I've just texted me father-in-law, and regular listeners and viewers of the podcast know that he is an Aston Villa fan. So I asked him his thoughts on Ramsey's imminent exit. And he said, I'd be very sad to see him go, but I understand pure profit of an academy player for FFP ruling. I think he's as good as Morgan Rogers, but his development was curtailed by injury when on the fringe of an international call-up. There's nowhere I'd rather see him go than to Newcastle United, a friendly rival in much the same situation. For me, a respected coach.
So pretty much Elliot Anderson.
Yes. So I think that seems to be the general consensus from Villa fans I've spoken to. I think one thing they can't quite get their head around is the price tag. But I guess when you're in that time of the window where you're probably going to have to pay a little bit more than maybe a player's worth, simply because the deadline is ticking down.
But also, when Newcastle have gone big since the PIF takeover, when they have spent big, they've always been questioned. So there was questions about, and I dare say we'll be talking about him fairly soon, Alexander Isak, when they paid 63 million for him. There was questions about the Anthony Gordon one in particular, and you look what he's probably worth now. I'd say probably double what they paid for him. So I think the good thing, and I know there's a bit of an argument about how Newcastle have conducted themselves under PIF in the transfer market in terms of the pace of deals. But when they do tend to go big, they do tend to, one, be successful, and two, end up being actually quite good value for money.
Something I've spoken about in the last few weeks, I think we maybe even spoke about it when you popped on, about where they were shopping in the window. And for me, I felt they were aiming for too ambitious of targets. I liked the ambition, but I think you were shopping in a market where you had Chelsea able to offer more money. You had the London pull, etc., etc. And the other one was you were shopping for players in Europe who've got that big potential, and again, attracts big clubs. I felt Newcastle maybe hung on in them two elements of the market for too long. And I saw a tweet from a well-known YouTuber who I think maybe a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but said, we were shopping in Harrods, but once we've come down to Morrison's, and there are other supermarkets and high street chains available, it's worked. And Newcastle are now cooking quite nicely in the transfer market. And that's something I actually subscribe to. I feel like maybe the club were aiming too high. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but actually what they've needed is the players who collectively can elevate the squad instead of that one big name star who actually is wanted by elite clubs who can offer more money. And I think Ramsey falls into that second category of a good player, not the world's best by any stretch of the imagination, but you throw him into a side with Tonali, Joe Linton, Gordon, and then you start to see Newcastle United getting better as a starting 11 and then as a squad.
So if I can put another spin on that, if Newcastle were to go and get a player from a Bayern Munich or a Real Madrid or a Barcelona, would they not see a move to Newcastle as a step down? Whereas when they have got Bruno Guimaraes from Lyon, Tonali's possibly the kind of outlier in this argument. But when they have got players from what you maybe consider the sort of second tier of European elite, they see it as a chance to shine in the Premier League areas. That doesn't really matter with Ramsey. But I think you're probably right when you see those big signings that have come into the Premier League. Newcastle, maybe at some point in the future, will be in line to get those signings. But I think, again, going back to the pace of the deals, if they were to go and get some of the deals that have gone elsewhere this summer, they would have to move quick and sort of get the deal done before anyone realises. And we both know in the world of football that just kind of doesn't happen now. So I think the Ramsey one it's someone who maybe still has a little bit to prove in the Premier League, and we shouldn't forget he will be coming here to play Champions League football at a club that has won a trophy in the last sort of 6 months. And working under Eddie Howe, and I keep saying this, and I think sadly what's happening and what's gone on this summer, Eddie Howe's almost been forgotten just how talented a coach he is. Now, look at the improvement he's brought out of Joe Linton, out of Fabian Schär, out of Anthony Gordon since he came in. There's not many players you could say he hasn't had an impact on. And I think that'll be an attraction for people like Aaron Ramsey as well.
Yeah,
Jacob Ramsey.
More so, and it must be. Yeah, Jacob Ramsey.
Sorry, yeah.
Easily done. But it must be given that he has been a first-team regular at Aston Villa. I mean, he played 10 times in the Champions League last season, 29 times in the Premier League. So it's not like Newcastle United are going in for someone who was on the fringes of United. I mean, starting 11. He played a lot of games. For him to take up this offer of joining Newcastle United when he knows as well that he's not necessarily going to be first choice, because the formations at the moment, it's kind of filled with players who've got those places nailed down. Obviously, element of competition and what have you, etc. Fair enough, but he's by no means guaranteed a starting place in the team, and yet he's going to come, wants to work with Eddie Howe, sees it as a big move. And look, it's not gone down well with everybody. Again, the price tag, some people are talking about. People are looking at, El Canus at Leicester's there for half that price, who I'm a big fan of. What to say they don't go out and get him as well, because that would prove to be a bargain. But it goes back to what you're saying. You trust Eddie Howe. You trust him to get the best out of the players that he wants. Yes, a little bit of discussion of his injury record, but I think it's not nowhere as bad as, say, Joe Willock's or what have you. And obviously, he missed a month between November and December. But after that, he was totally fine. I think this could be a really, really exciting deal. But it goes back to maybe what we were talking about there, the being unopposed for a signature, like they were for Malik Thiaw, like they were for Aaron Ramsey, like they were for Anthony Elanga. And that maybe makes the difference in here. When we see how quickly Newcastle United can move when there maybe aren't other clubs in for these players, but who are we to complain? As long as they get them over the line, that's all that matters.
Yeah, the El Canus one, I was really excited by that, because I think there's a real player in there and one of the very few positives from a nightmare season at Leicester last year. However, with him, I kind of see him as more as number 10. In Newcastle, even though there probably is a need to be more flexible this year in terms of formation, don't necessarily play with a 10. So I think it would have been a bit of a job to fit him into a side as Eddie Howe prefers to play. But as I say, I think there may be a need to be more fluid and a need to be more flexible with formation and team selection this season with the amount of games that they've got to play. So I think, the Ramsey one, I think it just works for all parties, doesn't it? That's a simple fact. It's a good move for him. Maybe needs to get out his comfort zone at Aston Villa. Newcastle needs someone who is going to be available for more games than not, unlike, unfortunately, Joe Willock, who we all know is massively talented. And if you had a Joe Willock that could play 40 games a season, I personally think he'd end up in the England squad because I think that's how good he is. But at the moment, he just seems to pick up these little niggles. So it's just not going to happen. So they do need that. One thing I will say, and apologise if I'm jumping ahead here, I think it's a massive season for Lewis Miley. I watched him at the Espanyol game last Friday night, and I thought he was best player on the pitch. I thought he was outstanding. So I think it's more competition for him as well. But again, going back to the schedule this season, Carabao Cup, FA Cup, Premier League, Champions League, expanded Champions League for the first time for Newcastle. So it's going to be where they are going to need sort of 23, 24, 25 players that can just come in the side and play.
Yeah, you need that depth, don't you? And that's what Newcastle United are building to. And I've already recorded the match preview ahead of Villa on Saturday with John Gibson, and I mentioned this in that episode with John, but I'll ask you as well, Mark. Obviously, it's not been the best of windows so far. It's been a little bit of a slow burner, a lot of heartache, a lot of probably reactionary comments from some on social media who are now hastily deleting their tweets. But I think if you look at it at the current point in time, and now we obviously we have to say we're talking about Ramsey being nearly done. It is nearly done, but there's still work to be done on the deal. Wisser again is in the same category, but we do expect these two players to become Newcastle United players. We mentioned the other three that they've signed. They've only actually gone in for Pedro, Trafford, help me out.
Agatike.
There's one more. Is that the only three they've gone in for? Everyone else? And Sesko.
Yes, Sesko, sorry.
Sesko. Talk of Delap, Cunha, and Burmo, they walked away from their deals. If you actually look at what Newcastle United have done and are set to do with these two players, Wisser and Ramsey coming in, I think it's actually been a decent window. Now, that's Alexander Isak saga aside, but the players have brought in exactly in the positions they needed to strengthen. Talented players coming in. I think if they get them over the line, it's not been a bad window.
So I'm always a great believer in you judge a window when it's finished. You can kind of take this assessment earlier in the summer and go, well, it's been a nightmare because of what's gone on. Then we look at this week and all of a sudden things are heating up. Now, yes, in an ideal world, a striker will be through the door before Newcastle go to Villa on Saturday. It's near impossible that's going to happen, I think. And even then, we know Eddie Howe doesn't throw players in the side. So I think there's a very good chance you'll see Anthony Gordon leading the line on Saturday. Now, if we sit here in sort of 3 weeks' time and say, right, there's two strikers have come in, the Isak situation's been resolved, whichever way that happens, Newcastle have strengthened everywhere, and they've probably got more strength and depth. I think they're not relying on players coming in and who they know probably aren't quite there in games. They can attack every competition they're playing in. Then it's a successful window. At the moment, it's promising. It really is. I think you make a good point in terms of, I think I saw something on social media about on Newcastle having a good window kind of under the radar a little bit. And I think it's probably a lot of truth in that. I think Ramsdale's a great addition. I think Thiaw will be an unbelievable addition in time. I think he will need time to settle, but he will be an unbelievable addition. And I really like Wisser. I think you look at his goal scoring record last season, and not even just his goal scoring record, but he's trying to think of what's the new term, like goal involvements in terms of assists as well is incredible. Can play across the front line, ticks all the boxes for me. But I still feel, even if Wisser comes in, there is a need for I'm not going to say bigger name because I don't think that's a route Newcastle need to go down, but another striker anyway to come in, someone who's a bit more maybe, I don't know, that sounds terrible, worthy of the tag of a number 9, you know what I mean? That sort of thing. Why they went for Sesko, I think they saw him as that player. João Pedro was probably that player. So I do think there's need for another striker, even if Wisser comes in.
No, I agree. And obviously you've got the African Cup of Nations in December to January. So you would lose Wisser for that as well, although it's not as bad a situation down the road at Sunderland where they're going to lose half the team, sign some decent players, and we're going to talk about them in a moment. But the African Cup of Nations, I think, does play away in the background. And obviously Isak, I think he will become a Liverpool player. I think Newcastle United will move him on. And again, I said this in the episode with John Gibson, so sorry if you're listening tomorrow and think he's repeating himself, but I think it's important to make the point here, is that actually if Newcastle can get Ramsey and Wisser in the next few days, what that then does is leave Newcastle United 2 weeks of just sole focus on getting the replacement for Alexander Isak. And I think that's exactly what they need to be doing. And I think that leaves them in a really good position to actually get this saga done and dusted, get someone in who can score goals alongside Wisser, get 150 million for Isak and reinvest that in January in the summer to come. And I think actually if that happens, Newcastle United finish the window in a much stronger position, even though they've lost a talented player like Alexander Isak. But just to go back to a point that I made, I've been making all summer. I mentioned on Monday that one of my wife's colleagues at her work has been saying, why is Andrew so calm? Why is he so calm when he's on the podcast? His name's Andy, actually. And this is exactly why. Wissa, Ramsey through the door. I always said, 1st of September, you judge them, as you've just mentioned there. It's really important not to just jump in and, get all upset about things. There's always time to make things right.
And because we live in an increasingly social media-led world where any rumour becomes, takes fire within seconds, look, I don't think Newcastle United have actually been in for half as many as players have been linked with this summer. Even probably 10% of them, given it's every single day. There's a player from here, there, and everywhere. But I look at it and I just think Newcastle have remained calm, and people within the club have remained calm from everything I've heard. Those at the top end are kind of moving things on now as we head towards the kind of final fortnight of the window. And now the Isak situation has dominated everything. There's no doubt about it. And I think that's been exacerbated by certain areas of the media, shall we say. But I think I'd be shocked if that deal gets done before Liverpool at St. James's Park, put it that way, because I think I don't think it'll happen. But if it does happen, Newcastle have to get the maximum they want and need from him, which, as he says, they want 150. I think it might go slightly less, but I don't think it'll be a lot less. I think maybe 140 wide on, something like that. But if he does go, then you're right. It's a great point that Newcastle have a fortnight, or have certainly a fortnight to plan for that and bring in players.
I still don't think he'll be sold unless they get a second striker in.
Yes, I'd agree.
I don't think Newcastle would roll that dice, simply because, as we mentioned, the Africa Cup of Nations coming down the line. So you'd be left with Gordon and Asula, and maybe a sulky Isak, who would probably go in January anyway. So I think, sorry, he'd be gone if obviously they sold him without a replacement. So I think they'll get a replacement in, and then they would agree a deal. So one to watch there. Just a reminder that this episode is sponsored by NORD VPN. Do hit the link in the podcast description box for a discounted offer on your plan. There's no risk with NORD, with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Loads of benefits to be had with NORD. If you're going abroad, you're not only safe and secure, but you can also catch up with all your UK favourite TV shows. Obviously, you have to have the relevant subscriptions, but you can change the location and never miss your favourite programme. One subscription can be used across 10 devices, which is absolutely brilliant. So your phones, your iPads, and what have you. And just keeps you nice and safe and secure on public transport as well. If you're connected to the Wi-Fi on the bus or the train or in the cafe or restaurant or wherever you are, in the pub perhaps, if you've got NordVPN, you can browse, knowing that you've got that added bit of security because it's nice and safe. So hit the link in the podcast description box. Stay secure, stay connected, and support the podcast at the same time. Right, time for the season preview, Mark, the overarching look at the Premier League campaign to come. And we'll start with transfer business of the summer and who wins the title of having the best summer so far. I've got 3 teams written down here. I'm going to whisper this one quietly because I don't want to lose any listeners or viewers. Liverpool.
Yeah.
I think they've done really well. And that's even before Isak, Guy. I think they've had a really good summer with Ekitike, Vert, Frimpong, and Curtsy. I think that's a really good addition to what is already a good squad. Adding Guy and Isak, then I think the Premier League title is maybe heading to Anfield. Manchester United potentially have had a decent window. I think Cunha and Burmo, Sesko, I think they need a little bit more. I still don't think they'll be qualifying for the Champions League, though, I have to be honest. I'm not really sold on the manager or his approach so far. Man City is another one who is on my list. Trafford, Al Kanuri, Cherky, Rangers, I think all decent, and they're apparently going to go and sign the PSG goalkeeper as well. Anyone else on that list, or any of those teams I've mentioned there that have caught your eye?
Yeah, I mean, Liverpool's the obvious one, isn't it? Because I think the one concern you'd had with Liverpool, 2 concerns maybe, was the fact that they just needed something else at fullback. Obviously, the new Trent Alexander-Arnold was going. Andy Robertson maybe didn't have his best season last season, and they've gone out and got Kurgash from Bournemouth, who was outstanding at Bournemouth for a couple of years. Frimpong, who is someone who I think has become one of the best attacking wing backs in possibly European football. I mean, Wirtz could be he will be an absolute superstar in the Premier League, I think. And the Ekitike one's a really interesting one because he's kind of a direct replacement for Darwin Núñez, and everything we've seen of Ekitike when he's at Frankfurt, he just gives you more clarity in front of goal than Núñez. You kind of never knew, unless he was at St. James's, obviously, as we saw last season, but you just never knew what you're going to get with Núñez. He was quite inconsistent, whereas I think Ekitike will maybe bring in that level of reliability that Liverpool need at the top end of the pitch. Looking at the other ones, Man City, you won't get another Man City season like last year. They'll be there or thereabouts this year. I've got no doubt about that. I think they've strengthened their squad in depth. I can't see Erling Haaland having another off season. We say that he still scored over 23, 24 goals. I think they'll be back this season massively. I think they'll be the ones that'll push Liverpool. Manchester United, you're right, at the top end of the pitch, they've done great business. Really going to be a new look forward line. But my concern last year was the midfield and defence, and they haven't really done much there yet. They may well do, still, as I said, just over 2 weeks left in the window. But I'm not sure they're quite there yet. I think you're right; they'll just miss out. And
I think you tie that in with the manager as well, and his reluctance to adapt to anything other than his approach to how he wants to play. And in one hand, you go fair play, you applaud that, but on the other hand, there were times last season you were thinking, just to stop you getting relegated, or just to get you up the league slightly, why aren't you changing the way you want to play? And then in the summer, bringing the players that you need to then go back to the way that you've made your name in this game. And I worry that this season, I mean, I would love them to flop because I cannot stand them. But I do actually like him, and but like I said, I'm not sold on him. But I think he needs to be more adaptable. I think sometimes you can die on the hill and you kind of question what for. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens outside of that attacking line, like you mentioned. Everton as well, I think they've gone under the radar slightly. I've got them down actually as my surprise package for the season, which we'll get onto in a moment. But the transfer business, I think, is really good. You've got Barry coming in from Villarreal. You've got a good couple of seasons there. You've got Dewsbury Hall, who, I mean, Chelsea obviously trying to build this title challenging side. I think he's a top player. I'm a little bit surprised that they've actually moved him on. And then obviously they've gone and got Jack Grealish on loan as well.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I don't really want to do it now, but I mean, I've got them down as my surprise package.
There we go.
So, and one player that I think we should mention is Alcaraz as well. He was great at St. James's last day of last season. Looks a real player. He's obviously got a little bit of that Premier League experience behind him. But the biggest factor at Everton is David Moyes. And I think people read too much into his spell at Manchester United. It was always going to be difficult to replace Sir Alex Ferguson. You could have put anyone in there and they would have struggled, and I genuinely believe that. When he took over at Sunderland, it was always going to be a struggle because the club was very much on a downward spiral at the time. I think he's a great manager. I know in kind of years gone by, he's been admired by previous hierarchy at Newcastle. Could have been approached at some point then. I think he's a great manager, and I think he deals with everything with class, with calmness. I think the Grealish signing, you're getting a motivated player in a World Cup year. Everything feels right about that deal, and I think he's one of the most talented players in the Premier League, Jack Grealish, when he's at it. I think he's incredible, and I think he's a leader. He's grown into a leader. He's got a point to prove, and I think that'll make him really dangerous for opposition this season. The other one, and I'm not sure I'm saying it's a strong window in the sense of that they've done great business, but I'm more fascinated to see with Leeds because they've gone for a very the profile of player they've gone for have all been the same. They're all big physical players. I don't think they made a signing of a player that's below 6'1" or 6'2". They're all physical. They're all big. So I think I'm really fascinated to see how this works because, and by all accounts, we're about to sign Calvert-Lewin as well. I would go into that one and say they will need another striker, I think, because I'm not sure you're going to get 35 games out of Calvert-Lewin. Or 35 starts, I should say. But I'm really fascinated to see how this works. I mean, the manager's got a bit to prove in the Premier League, Daniel Farke. Hasn't quite happened from previous clubs. But they've made some good signings, some solid signings, and I think they're going to be horrible to play against. I will say that. I kind of obviously Newcastle go then in 3 weeks' time, don't they? And I think it's going to be awful down there. It's going to be such a nightmare to play. Ellen Road's going to be a big factor, so I'm really fascinated to see how their business works out. And of course, be interested to see how Sean Longstaff gets on there.
I think Sean Longstaff will have an absolute belt last season. I think what he needed was just the reassurance that he was actually going to be somewhere permanently, and he's going to get the chance to start games. I think now he's had that opportunity to be focused. I think he'll go under the radar. I think as he always did at Newcastle, not someone that grabs the headlines, but I think for a team whose main aim is to stay in the Premier League, I think he could be absolutely crucial. And we're going to talk now about those teams who are potentially going to go down. I have got Leeds going down. I've got Burnley going down. And then I've struggled to fill the third spot. I've got a few teams written down. And maybe a bit of a surprise to people watching. Listen, I've got Brentford there.
I don't think that's a surprise.
No. Bournemouth as well. I'm a little bit worried for Bournemouth. Now, I like the manager. I think he's absolutely brilliant. What he did last season was absolutely superb. But they've sold big stars. And so far, I mean, they've replaced their left back with someone from Ligue 1, and by all accounts, he looks a decent enough player. But they've sold their two centre backs, and someone have they? I don't think they've replaced them, have they?
Not yet. I thought the thing with Bournemouth is they're basically rebuilding the defence in one window, and that's never easy. Now, you're right about the manager, Araola. I think he's an unbelievable manager. And look, obviously, we hope Eddie Howe is Newcastle manager for the next 15, 20 years. But if he ever moved on, probably England, then I would love to see Iraola given a chance at Newcastle. Similar style of play, similar style of manager. The other one I'll throw in is Wolves. Now, I think Wolves had a good setting off to the season under Vitor Pereira. He clearly coaxed an improvement out of them. The transfer business has been a little bit underwhelming so far, but again, as I say, going back to what I said earlier, you kind of judge it on September the 1st once that deadline passes. But I just wonder if they've got enough. If they were to lose a Strand Larson, for example, who has, of course, been mentioned in dispatches by Newcastle, you'd fear for Wolves a little bit. But yeah, Leeds, I think, Ellen Road, it's a real cliche, but will play a big factor. As I think the Stadium Light can for Sunderland. If that's rocking, it'll be awkward. I think that they need a good start on Saturday against West Ham. And Burnley, yeah, I mean they've done a lot of business and they've made some signings that have caught people by surprise. Kyle Walker, for example. I don't think anyone saw that one coming. And there are some shrewd additions in there, but I don't know if it's enough to keep them up. Yeah, and the thing with Burnley as well, what fascinates me is if they can transfer this ridiculous defensive record they had last season, was it 16 goals conceded in the Premier League, in the Championship, in league fixtures?
They have lost James Trafford.
They've lost Trafford. I think Burnley are the ones where you would worry more about them. Sunderland, I mean, I've covered Sunderland in pre-season a little bit for the Chronicle Journal and Sunday Sun, and seen sort of 4 of the friendlies now. I look at it, and with Sunderland, I think they've done some good business in the middle of the park. I think Habib Diarra is a very, very good player.
He
good
looks
signing.
Excellent. And people are very impressed.
Yeah, Noah Siddiqui, I think the same. Granit Xhaka will lead them in midfield. There's a bit of depth in midfield as well with Enzo Lefebvre, with Chris Rigg, and Dan Neil. It's elsewhere that I worry about them. I know they've just brought in another centre-back, but I still think they need another centre-back to either partner or provide competition. I think they're kind of fine in full-back areas now. Top end of the pitch, I still think there's a need for a front man, even though they brought in Mark Guehi on loan from Chelsea. I like Mayenda, but I think, again, he's got a lot to prove in the Premier League. Isidore, possibly, he is the same. But I just think that proven kind of goal scorer they'll need. There is a bit of talk that one is coming in. But I just feel they're a little short at both ends of the pitch at the moment.
And then the African Cup of Nations is going to hit them hard.
It will, and I had this chat with a journalist who covers something on a regular basis, and he sort of said, look, all those players, there's a chance some of the countries won't qualify, and some of them haven't even played for the country at senior level. So it may not be as bad as people think. I mean, they are still going to lose players, and they know that, but I don't think it'll be as bad as people think.
Just on Bournemouth, they have signed a centre-back. Their second most expensive player. Do you want to give a go? I'm terrible at pronouncing names, so I'll let you do the honours.
Before Diakite, yeah. I mean, he was another one linked with Sunderland and a number of Premier League clubs. I think there's a 40 million-ish, roughly, they paid for him. Yeah. Highly rated, strong, powerful, good on the ball, everything you expect of a Bournemouth defender. But again, it's that thing of how quickly can these new defenders that they brought in settle into life in the Premier League. It's a similar challenge with Sunderland. I mean, the midfielders we've just spoken about, they're relying a lot on Xhaka to help Diarra and players like that settle into the Premier League. So yeah, it's really interesting at the bottom. I think there's maybe 6 or 7 will be at risk.
Brentford, you said it's not a surprise. Thomas Frank going is one thing, but then Amorim, Wissa potentially now they are in the market for another striker who they look like they're gonna sign. Obviously before Wissa goes. Keith Andrews, though, I know he's been in the back room and he knows the club well, but I think that's a big gamble.
Lost NORD as well, haven't they, to Arsenal, which is a big loss in midfield. Yeah, the Andrews appointment, I think it's the continuity, isn't it? But sometimes when you've had someone in charge as long as Thomas Frank was there, sometimes having fresh eyes on it, and I hate using the word project, but I will, having fresh eyes on the project can kind of revitalize things a little bit. And I've got no doubt Keith Andrews will come in and put his own stamp on things. But it's a big ask to ask a rookie manager to make an impact in the Premier League like that. So, yeah, interesting. Again, I think Brentford are one. How do you replace the amount of goals they have lost or potentially going to lose with Wissa if he does go? Because you look at what him and Mbeumo did last season, it was extraordinary at a club. And I mean this with all due respect, at a club the size of Brentford in the Premier League. It was an incredible output that the two of them put together. So you look at the business so far, it's nothing's really caught the eye too much. So yeah, it's going to be a big one for them, big test for them. I think they could be the ones potentially at risk.
Yeah, and anyone else? I mean, West Ham haven't done too much of sign Callum Wilson. I have to be honest, I look at Spurs, and I think obviously Thomas Frank's a tremendous appointment. But I do look at them and think, have they really done enough this one? I know they signed Palino in centre mid on loan, Kudus obviously on the wing. But again, I look at it and think, is there too much improvement from what they had last year? I mean, is the manager going to be the key difference?
Yeah, he is. And I really like Thomas Frank. I think he's a manager who I think how do I do that? I'm going to sound like I'm disrespecting Brentford again here, but I think he's earned a move up the food chain to an extent. I think that you'll see more business from Tottenham over the next sort of 2.5 weeks, and I think you'll see a big improvement on what they've got. I think you'll get the best out of players like Solanke. The wide players will improve in the manner that he did with Mbeumo. I really do rate Thomas Frank. I like the intensity that his teams play with, the kind of controlled aggression that they play with, and I think he could be the one that'll maybe. I think Tottenham will push top 8 this season. I really do. Yeah. I think they'll improve massively under him.
So when I ask you for your flops in terms of teams, and top of my list is Spurs.
Spurs, okay. Well, I've got West Ham, but then we had this discussion before we started recording.
Can you flop?
Can you flop from very little? But I just think when you look at Potter's gone in there, and he still has a bit of a reputation, doesn't he, about him when he had that great spell at Brighton, and you were kind of hoping he'd go in after the kind of the poor spell he had at Chelsea where it didn't quite happen. And you just think going into West Ham, a big club, great fans, that expectation. Not long since they've won a major trophy in the Conference League. Can you go and put your stamp on it? I just feel as if it hasn't happened. And I look at the signings. Look, I love Callum Wilson when he was at Newcastle because he was just guaranteed goals when he was fit. But you look at the other business that they've done, and you just think, I think, again, we said, didn't we, Kyle Walker-Peters as a kind of prudent addition on a free transfer, can cover both sides. But everything else they've done, I'm just not completely sold on it.
One to watch there. I have also got Manchester United on the list of flops. I don't think they're going to do what their fans think they're going to do and what they really have to after spending all this money. And Chelsea as well. But it goes back to the definition of flop. I mean, I've got them third in my Premier League table, but I think the money they've spent,
they should be challenging.
They need to be getting closer to the top 2, and I don't think they'll get close to Manchester City or Liverpool.
Yeah, I'd agree. The interesting one, we haven't even mentioned them, as Arsenal. Now,
yeah, I mean,
I think they'll do what they've done most years, which is they'll have promise. They'll look as if they're going to put in a full challenge. Obviously, they've resolved one issue with Gyökeres.
He's going to flop.
You think he'll flop?
He's top of my list for flop.
I just think the service he'll get at Arsenal from your Martinellis and Saka, I just think if he gets in the right areas, he'll score goals.
I don't think Mikel Arteta will be Arsenal manager come the start of next season.
Wow, it's a bold prediction.
Because I don't think they're going to win any silverware. I've got them down as 4th this season to come, so qualifying for the Champions League. But I don't think they'll make an assault on the title. And even if they did, they're not winning it.
No, I
And
don't think they'll win it, but what you need is a serious title challenge from Arsenal this year, don't you, to prove that they are kind of the real deal. I'm interested by Zubimendi. I think he's another one that kind of fits a gap that they needed in midfield. I think he's a wonderful player. Loved him at Real Sociedad, an unbelievably underrated player. Maybe outside of La Liga, I think. Maybe people didn't realise how good he is. I think he'll prove how good he is this season. But yeah, I think Arsenal will be... I've got them as fourth, I've got to be honest. I think they'll be...
I've got them as fourth, but I don't think that'll be good enough for him to keep his job. He can't go another season without silverware, and obviously the main one is the Premier League.
So have we got exactly the same top four? Is that what we're saying? Liverpool, Man City, Chelsea, Arsenal?
Well, I've got Man City top. If Liverpool sign Gay and Isak, then that switches. Because I think if they sign Isak, there is no title race because he's the difference. At the moment, I think City have got a better chance. I think Alcanere from Wolves is such a good signing. I think brilliant. So they win the title at this moment in time. Chelsea third for me, Arsenal fourth. I've got Newcastle down at fifth.
Yeah, so that.
Villa sixth, Everton seventh, and then Man United in eighth. I mean, I put Newcastle United down. Not reluctantly is the wrong word, but I think I'm being a little bit too positive there.
So my thing here is, right, that because of all the talk around Alexander Isak, we've kind of forgot how good a team Newcastle actually are.
Well,
I know he's a great player. He's made a big difference, and I'm not underplaying how important he is. Please don't think that at all. But there is still one of the best midfielders in the Premier League there. There is still, with Burn and Fabian Shaw, an established centre-back partnership, which now has genuine competition from Botman and Malik Thiaw, who, they could be Newcastle's centre-back partnership for the next 10 years. You've got two full-backs in Lewis Hall and Tino Livramento, who, again, could be Newcastle's full-back partnership for the next 10 years. There's two established goalkeepers now. There's a lot of good wide players. Alanga's only added to that. We shouldn't, and I haven't mentioned Lewis Miley, and I should. I did earlier, but in this little thing, you got him, you got Ramsey possibly coming in, you got Wissa coming in. Now, if another striker comes in on top of that, all of a sudden you look at Newcastle and go, that squad's unbelievable.
Yeah, we need to remember as well that actually they qualified for the Champions League without Isak largely because he was pitiful towards the end of last season. My only concern is, and I say I'm maybe being over positive about them finishing fifth, but I'm a little bit scarred by that original Champions League campaign under Eddie Howe, and it's whether they've added enough depth to go one better and also maintain their league form, and B, whether the players who played that campaign have actually taken on as an experience. And look, if they have done and they take it as a positive, what happened, and there is enough depth where with the signings they're set to make on top of the signings they have, then you would argue there is. It's just whether everything clicks, injuries, form. It's going to be a tough campaign. I'll back Eddie Howe to get through it, and the core is there. The core is there, most certainly, to have a good campaign.
I think lessons were learned at every level of the club during that last Champions League campaign. I think there was a little bit of, maybe not in the playing staff and the management, just a little bit of complacency after the first two games. Possibly across the board, to be honest. I mean, getting a goalless draw Milan, no matter how it was secured, was an unbelievable start. And, we could talk, let's be honest, we could sit here all night and talk about Paris Saint-Germain at home. But then I just felt as if there was a little bit of complacency because they had Dortmund at home, who were completely underestimated, by the way. Same with the away game. I think it was kind of almost taken for granted. PSG was unfortunate with the penalty. I mean, Newcastle were unbelievable that night. And again, I keep going back to him, but Lewis Miley that night came of age for me. And then AC Milan going ahead at home with that Joe Linton goal, it just kind of felt as if people just thought, right, well, that's it. And I think in the Champions League, you cannot take anything for granted. It bites you on the wherever if you do that. And I think that's the lessons that Newcastle have learned from that. So, hopefully those lessons will be heeded when the campaign starts in September, I think it is.
Yeah, August the 28th is the draw. Can't wait to see who we get. So yeah, top six there, just round off again. Man City, Liverpool, Chelsea, Arsenal, Newcastle, and Villa for me. Then I've got Everton, and then Manchester United.
Brighton I want to watch as well, and I know people say this every year, but their recruitment, unsurprisingly, has gone under the radar. They will pluck gems. I know they're probably going to lose Belieber by the sounds of it to to Manchester United and big money deal, but we know that'll be reinvested in someone who'll come in and do an equally good job. But the business this summer has been really good. I think Matt Riley might be going as well. I think there's a little bit of talk about him going to Juventus, but again, I think there's enough in there with Brighton. You know, the structure they've got is kind of what Newcastle need to an extent. I just think they'll be sort of challenging top 8.
What's interesting, you mentioned that, because we haven't really spoken about Nottingham Forest, who obviously tailed off towards the end of last season. They have managed to get themselves up a level in the European competition with Palace's demise. Now, they've kind of got another radar as well. They've held on to the majority of that squad. Obviously, they sold Anthony Langer for big money, but everyone else is there. I'm a little bit impressed by their work in the transfer market, to be honest. I think Igor Jesus could be a big star. And to talk about Newcastle for a moment, the one thing people talk about Ross Wilson, who is, we believe, set to become Newcastle's sporting director, is the fact that Forest have very good scouting networks across the globe, and they've gone and signed 2 players from the Brazilian league, 2 players who've had, are held in pretty high regard as well. And that really fills me with optimism that actually Newcastle United in the years to come, if Ross Wilson does get the appointment, can actually go down the route where actually, they are picking gems from these far-flung places who either become stars or become and stay, or become stars and get sold on, and Newcastle, manage to play the PSR game in the way other teams have, like Brighton.
The recruitment at Forest in the last sort of 2 years has been near faultless, I think. And can you remember, if we go back when they were making sign after sign after sign, and everyone's going, well, this is just mess, and it's just chaotic. It's scattergun, it's everywhere. And then all of a sudden, this wonderful side, this full of intensity and energy and pace and power, that probably in hindsight should have finished higher in the Premier League than they did in the end. The kind of slight deficiencies within the squad that needed to be kind of resolved, they've done. They've got competition for Chris Wood. They've got cover for him. They've got energy and kind of depth in midfield now. Really looking forward to seeing how Elliot Anderson builds on what he did last year, because for me, he's got to be close to an England call-up now. I think he would give England something they don't really have in the middle of the park. But yeah, I think the big one as well is, and I know there's a lot of jokes about this when it was announced, but it's holding on to Morgan Gibbs-White, who is a sensational player and someone who is absolutely fundamental to the way they play. So I think for all the jokes there were about why he's staying and stuff like that, the fact they've seen off competition from a supposedly bigger club, the fact that they've got him on a new contract, I think is just a massive signal of intent.
But defenders as well. I mean, hold on to Murillo and Markovic as well. I think that's really, really good business. I think they've got a good squad. They've made a few additions which go under the radar. I mean, I've got Jesus as my surprise package this season. I think he really will be. I think maybe the campaign just got a little bit too much for them. I think it can happen when you're being chased rather than chasing others. So that maybe no surprise they fell away eventually. But I think they could have a decent enough season. I did originally have them down as 8th, but I've swapped Manchester United in there and then moved Forest down 1. I think they've had a pretty poor pre-season is the only thing.
I think when you're looking at where they were at kind of towards the back end of last season, the game at St. James has kind of summed them up, where Newcastle blew them away, absolutely blew them away for 45 minutes. And then it was almost like, okay, like regather and go again. So they're kind of one of those sides, maybe a little bit like Newcastle were a few years back, where they just weren't quite ready for that real push. But I think this year it's going to be the one thing we should say in terms of themselves and Palace, it's how they cope with European football, because we know from first-hand experience it's not easy to be playing that sort of, Saturday, Sunday, Tuesday, Wednesday, back into a Saturday, Sunday every week. With them, obviously, it's the Thursday, Sunday as well, with them being in the competitions that they're in. So, I think that's a big challenge for both of those clubs. But I do think that Forest are the ones who are probably more capable of kind of coping with the demands of the increased fixtures.
So a surprise package in terms of a player mentioned by there, Jesus.
It's a really difficult one, because I think it's... I'm going to unstack at Leeds. So someone I watched in Bundesliga quite a bit, an absolute powerhouse of a midfielder, will probably pick up double figures in terms of yellow cards. I've got no doubt about that. Him and Joe Linton could be absolutely box office at Ellen Road later this month. So I'm really interested to see how he fares in the Premier League. He's, as I say, he's going to be in midfield with Sean Longstaff in there. You know, they're both 6 foot plus. He's capable of popping up with the goal. He's impressed in pre-season as well. So it's probably one that hasn't really hit the headlines in terms of across the Premier League. But I'm interested, more interested and intrigued to see how he fares.
What about the player you're most looking forward to seeing? I've gone for Jack Grealish.
You see, I was going to, but I don't feel like I can. Not now. I think we've agreed too much, haven't we?
I think Jack Grealish at Everton's a good move for him. You've mentioned previously in this episode about the World Cup, and all of that. He's spoken about how Moyes is a big factor. Look, he's someone that winds opposition fans up. I mean, look, he comes up to Everton up here in the blue, will be on his back. But I'm just looking forward to seeing a man of his ability, who I think was a little bit weighed down by the price tag and the expectation, just let off the leash, really. I think he's going to have a storming season. He knows he has to. Potentially the last major tournament he'll get to, maybe. I'm just looking forward to seeing how it goes, because it's either going to go swimmingly or it's going to go so bad.
So for me, I will go with Ryan Cherky at Manchester City.
Yes.
Because I think there's been a lot of talk about this kid for years now. You know, he's going to make the big move. Not that Leon aren't a big club; they are absolutely a big club. But can he go and do it at another level? Can he do it in the Premier League or La Liga or wherever? Now he's in Man City. He's arguably going to be that replacement for De Bruyne to an extent.
Easy.
So can he step into the shoes of someone who's arguably, and that certainly not even arguably, in the last decade has been the best attacking midfielder in the Premier League, one of the best in the world. That's the thing that's impressed me with Manchester City. Sorry to go a bit wider here, but this summer they've kind of made signings that have maybe got that point to prove. You know, Trafford, can he step up to be a number one? Will he get the chance with Donnarumma being linked? You know, Nori, I agree what you said earlier. He was someone I would love Newcastle to have got before Lewis Hall came in. Reinders coming into the Premier League. Can he prove himself in the Premier League? I like that, and I think they've got players coming back to sort of full fitness, particularly the heart of defence, which means Man City will be a real threat this season. But yeah, Cherky's the one where I just think, go and do it. Go and prove it. Show everyone you can be the star that we think you are at the top level, and go and become the... I don't think you can't replace Kevin De Bruyne, but can you become that sort of hope in attacking midfield, that number 10 role that everyone wants you to be?
The flop then, in terms of a player, mine is
Well, got yours, haven't we?
I think I genuinely think he's just going to flop, and that will accelerate Mikel Arteta's walk towards the exit door.
It's difficult with a flop because you look at big signings. I think I possibly look at Kudus, you know, and I know I said earlier that Thomas Frank will get the best out of his wide players, but I think the fee that they've paid for him is it's quite over the top. And I know we spoke about Newcastle with Elanga, which was let's be honest, overpaid for him, I think. But I like Kudus, but I think you need a structure around him that'll get the best out of him. And I'm not sure that's in place yet at Tottenham. There needs solidity around him and discipline and control.
I think what might help him avoid flopping is if Thomas Frank can get the time. Now, it seems like Spurs is one of those that they want everything straight away. Not necessarily the fans, but at least, you know, Daniel Levy and the owners. And that's one thing, Frank, obviously you can't have that written into your contract that you can need time. But if he gets time, I think 3-4 years, you will see Spurs becoming once again an established top 4, top 6 side. But if this season has the expectation of last season, the season before, that's why I've got them down as potentially flopping, because I just think he needs time to do what he does and do it well.
Yeah.
I mean, Brentford, I'm sure that had a horrendous time at one point, and they stuck by him, and then obviously had the best finish in their history, sort of thing. But I just can't see him getting that time in Tottenham.
I hope he does. I really do, because I think if he does, then Tottenham, as you say, will be back in the top 6. Will be, you know, pushing for those Champions League places again, because I think that is how good a manager he is. But it's kind of going to be a big turnaround, particularly, and I think we talked earlier about managers being a little bit stubborn. We saw that at Tottenham last year, didn't we, with Ange? I know it kind of paid off with the the European win, but I mean, it was a nightmare Premier League season. And I know there's people saying they wrote it off with about 2 months left to focus on Europe. But I just think Thomas Frank, although there's a lot of similarities between him and Ange, he will have a lot of work to do to get this squad playing exactly the way he plays, the way Brentford played, and that is going to take time, you're right. As I say, I think, the Kudus one, it is purely based on the fee. If you're going to pay that much for a player, you want him to be the star day one of the season, play right the way through the season, give you those returns, goals, those assists, everything, win games. And I'm not sure he's at that phase yet.
Final question then. I want a wild prediction. I want something out there that I'll clip up. Hold you to it.
So social media clicks, yeah.
I'm joking.
You've done
My I say wild. I don't think that's that wild. There'll be one person in particular who's watching this and shaking his head. But my prediction is that Strand Larsen will hit. I said 15 plus goals a couple of weeks back. I'm going to go. I think he'll hit 20.
I don't think he'll do that at Wolves.
Well, that's my prediction.
This
is the game of pain.
It is crazy. It's crazy. Let's go all out here. My prediction is that Ruben Amorim will not be Manchester United manager at the end of the season.
Oof. I suppose I've said that about Mikel Arteta, so maybe that's the prediction I should have gone with.
Yeah, I don't know.
I did say at the start of when he came in towards the end of last season, I said by October he'll be gone.
I think he's a good manager, a good coach, and I think he will be successful somewhere. His sporting sides were unbelievable to watch with some brilliant players. But there's a lot of pressure on Manchester United to improve, and not just improve this season, but seriously improve. And, if it gets to Christmas, if it gets to sort of January when the window opens and they're sat even mid-table, then there'll be a lot of pressure on them.
There we go. Manchester United and Arsenal both looking for new managers to come in the summer.
Do a swap.
Imagine that there. That would be a wild prediction. Thank you to Mark for popping on to the Everything is Black and White podcast and bringing you the season preview. We're looking forward to getting it underway. Newcastle, of course, travel to Villa Park on Saturday. Fingers crossed they can beat Aston Villa and start their campaign as they mean to go on. There will be a match preview and the view from the opposition coming later in the week from myself and Mark. We'll see you guys very soon.